I heard two old elderly ladies in their 90s and 80s talked about the old days, and they smiled, and they talked about the sorghum as if they were going in the drugstore once a year to get a piece of candy that they hadn't had all year long and the excitement in it. So they told me about how the communities would come together in the fall of the year. Each one of them would raise the sorghum. They raised about everything that they ate back in the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s. And sorghum was one of those crops. But the sorghum was more or less like a homecoming. It was like a festive event because each family would raise their crop of sorghum and they would harvest it. They would bring it to a central location in the community, and then someone that knew how to cook the sorghum and had the mill, the portable mill, he would bring it there and set it up, and each family would help each other squeeze and cook their sweet sorghum cane, for the winter, the next summer, and through the winter and through the summer until the next fall when they would do it again. But they talked about it with such happiness, with such togetherness. Excitement was in the air, and I could see it in their eyes as they talked, and I could hardly get a word in edgeways. We were already doing a traditional community garden that has grown to about 13 acres here in our community, but the sorghum is a special thing. It's a mysterious plant. It's a resilient plant. And taking a tiny seed that will grow to a 14-foot green plant, harvesting it, pulverizing that stalk, and watching this liquid fructose come from the plants. And then the cooking process, as you watch it go through different stages of coloration, changes until it's a beautiful golden brown bubbling in the pan. You take the heat away from it, and you've got a beautiful, tasty product that you produced that is all natural. And the journey along the way was wholesome. The collaboration, the working together, it's just a beautiful, innovative way to holistic health for the community. Then I find out that other communities were interested in the process as the different tribal groups from across the state came, and there was collaboration. The children were excited about being a part of the process. So you got your elders, you got your children involved, and there's intergenerational collaboration, innovative way to us being happy and healthy. My name's Greg Jacobs, and I am of the Coharie Tribe. I am fortunate to be the tribal administrator for the tribe right now. My main duties incorporate overseeing all of the developed programs that we're operating here in the community, assessing what problems we see, what weaknesses we see in our community, finding resources, developing programs that will address those problems. I came up in a day, born in 1953, 70 years old, that I had a security blanket. That security blanket was community, the relationship between the different families. We had such a relationship that we were all one. We played on each other's weaknesses and strengths. We shared that to have a healthy, strong community. We took care of each other. Well, as the tribal administrator for the second time, I became the tribal administrator for the second time in 2011, and I took a look around at what were the passions in our community. I was able to take a look at my childhood and the stories that my father told me. What made our people happy? As I began having conversations out in the community, I would jot down the different subjects that they talked about and the looks on their face and their expression and the passion. One thing was agriculture. Our people have the right kind of relationship with Mother Earth. We respect it. To put our hands in it is like medicine. It's like medicine with no bad side effects. And it's free. The exercise is a beautiful thing. Being out in the open and getting the fresh air, it's a holistic, innovative way back to health. And through our community gardens, it's a collective effort that I see intergenerational collaboration. Different families collaborate with each other. Different tribes collaborate with each other out in the fields in our agricultural processes.
My name is Brent Simmons. I'm of the Coharie Tribe, and this is family land here that my family owns, and I let the tribe utilize the land and the equipment, my equipment and stuff, to grow their sorghum cane, put it in, and then harvest it. They growed a lot of ice potatoes this year. I think they planted 600 pounds of red ones and 600 pounds of white ones, and they produced pretty good and stuff. And it was one day, and there might have been 100 people out there or more, and they came and we dug them in one day, and people picked them all up in the same day and carried them home with them. They were leaving the field with 5-gallon buckets full of potatoes and stuff. It's labor intensive, but it's a good labor. There's a lot of people, I guess, that they say, well, that's too hard to get out there, but we growed up doing this. That's just the way it was.
My name is Christopher Faircloth. I'm a master gardener. I'm also over the sorghum program for the Coharie Tribe, and also over some of their community gardens. I'm not letting go of the old ways, and I want to teach as many people and share my knowledge of making syrup, whether it's making syrup or growing vegetables or whatever kind of preserving that they need. That's what I want to do, is to keep this alive, this tradition that was brought over in the early 1800s. It was originally started as a food for slaves. The seed pods, they found they could boil them and make porridge out of them, and it was a cheap food for the slaves. So the slavers started sending a lot of these tops for them to feed the slaves with over their journey over here. And on the plantations, they would started planting and using this. And then later in the 18th century, the sugar plantations had dominated the market, and the southern plantation owners were wanting to hedge in on that market. So they tried for a certain amount of time to grow sorghum to compete with the sugar industry. But the enzymes in sweet sorghum versus the sugar cane are different. So the sugar cane crystallizes faster and holds its form faster, where sweet sorghum remains a syrup for an extended period of time, and they couldn't make it profitable. After that, it kind of died down a little bit, except for in the rural communities were growing it. And of course, you had the World War I. Then you had the Great Depression, where people just couldn't afford to buy sugar. So these rural communities, like the Coharie Tribe is a good example, their community members would grow a little patch of this sweet sorghum, and it was a community effort. It wasn't just one person's effort, it was a community effort. And each one of these people or families would grow their sorghum, harvest it, and there would be a central point to where everybody brought their sorghum. And they also had a traveling, I call them serpentiers, because that's what we are, serpentiers, that had a mule, and a wagon, and he would go from community to community and set up, and he would process their sorghum for them. But what was really appealing to me that we still need in the communities is that it brought everybody in the community together. And whether you had a big patch or a small patch of sweet sorghum, once it was put into that pile and it was processed, everybody was given the same amount of syrup. And they would take that syrup and put it in 50-gallon wooden barrels, and they'd put it in the cribs. They call it cribs, where they kept the corn and stuff like that. And as they needed something sweet to make cakes with, or for their pancakes, or any of to put in their coffee, they would go out and draw all out of that 50-gallon barrel, just like it had a tap in it, just like you see the old wine barrels. And that got them through until the next year, where they didn't have to have any sugar or anything. We've been doing this for 8 years, and this is probably one of the best crops that we have ever had, and I enjoy doing it. And a lot of it is volunteer work. We volunteer a lot of our time to the tribe concerning this. Also, it's a tradition that we want to keep alive.
I like molasses, and it's a mild, more caramel tasting product to me. This sorghum, they use it as a sweetener, and you can use it anywhere, anytime you need a sweetener to put in your coffee or bake with it, pies, cake, or whatever, you can use it as a sweetener. So people would grow a little patch of it, but they didn't have the equipment to process it. Maybe one guy in the community would have the equipment to process it. So you after you cut your cane down, you would take it to him, he would squeeze it, he would cook it for you, and you would get your syrup, and then the syrup that you brought back home, that will last you till the next year. And then you grow another little patch for the next year. So it was something that people done, to have a sweetener. It looks like a cornstalk growing up. Once it matures, it's got a seed head at the top. And when it's ready to be harvested, you strip the leaves off of it, and you cut the seed head off, and then you take a knife or a machete, cut it off at the ground, and you got stalks. And then you take and you squeeze the juice out of those canes. Back in the day, they'd have a horse, and a horse would be hooked up to a boom pole, and it would turn the machine that would squeeze the juice. The horse would walk around and around in a circle, feed the cane into a squeezer that squeezed the juice out of it, and then they left the horse and mule from doing that task when they got tractors and stuff, And so now we, hook a tractor up to it and run the mill to squeeze the juice out of it. Once we get the juice out of the stalks, you have to cook it for about 4 or 5 hours. And there's a ratio of something like 12 gallons of green sorghum juice to make 1 gallon of syrup. It's very labor intensive. It's manual work to get it out of the field and to process it.
What we are doing now, we're defoliating the plant till we have nothing but the stalk, because there's a lot of starch and other impurities in the leaves that if you mix it with the juice, it makes the syrup bitter. So we're removing the leaves so it removes that factor from the juice. The cleaner the juice, the better quality of syrup it is. Taking the leaves off and taking the tops off also increases the concentration inside the stalks.
The sugar content in this, once it peaks, that's the best time, to process it, and then it starts going downhill. And if it stays there too long, you could actually sour in the field, and you might lose the crop. So you got to get it out then. You can't wait 2 weeks after the fact. If you do, you'll lose it.
Our sorghum harvest has gotten so large that the labor that it takes to harvest it is sort of above our capacity. So we're having to turn to alternative methods. It just so happened that I had a great nephew that went to East Carolina University, and as I was thinking, well, Greg, you can have these community days and we can all enjoy it, but you're going to have to mechanize if you're going to get all of this work done in a timely manner, or you're going to lose those crops in the field. So we have been exploring sorghum growers across the country, down in Mississippi and various other places. We actually went out to view their processing plants, their harvesting practices. We took pictures. We talked to them. They wouldn't give us the diagrams to their machines. They were custom built just for them. But as we looked at these pictures and I thought about the progress our community had made in educational attainment, I said, we've got mechanical engineers. They've got access to programs on computers. They can turn these pictures into drawings of exactly how we can mechanize this process. So we found a fabricator in the community. He's a welder, can build about anything that he's got the instructions on how to build. And he said, if you'll bring me these instructions on paper, he said, I'll build it for you. So I went to Mr. Spencer Jacobs, which I'm very proud of. One of the very few in my family to have a 4-year degree. And he looked at the pictures. He watched the videos on YouTube. He said, okay, Greg, I can do this. Well, that just exploded my heart of the advancement of a people that didn't even have a high school as Native American as Native American children in my father's day. My father, he passed in 2010. He was born in 1908. He only had a 7th grade education because that was all that was available to him. But he pushed for the day that I had a better opportunity for an education. I am pushing for a day that the future generations Well, I got to see that the fruits of our labor when my nephew looked at something that would have been so difficult for me. I had to think out of the box to even think about it. And he said, sure, I can put these plans. He put those plans on paper as we speak. Our own machinery that we're going to use to mechanize the process is being fabricated today. Also, a part of this journey has been that there is a huge market out there for sorghum. You can't find it everywhere. I don't think you'll find it in Food Line or other places. It's an art, the cooking of it. But there is a great demand because it's such a healthy plant. It's gluten-free. When you cook it, there's no additives. It's all a natural process. We can, and we're looking at turning it into an economic adventure for the community. I think the process can be refined to where we can do that. And I'm going to keep these community volunteers happy. They're going to grow more each year. We're going to mechanize. We're going to look at the market, try to develop marketing plans, try to make it an economic venture, which will benefit our social programs that we're trying to develop here. We have passions in our community. I have a community, a master gardener that I was fortunate enough to discover within our community. I can't hold him back. He wants bigger and better each year. Like I said, we went from 1/4 acre to, at one time, 13 acres of community garden. When you find passions, you can't hold them back. If you can give them the resources to do what they love, there's no stopping them, and I appreciate those volunteers that are in our community. But one interesting fact is that they're pulling in more people, and there's more folks that we're serving that are happy and interested and receiving an education in the whole process. The community is not going to allow me to back up on these agricultural practices that we're doing. So we have to have a sustainability plan. And this sorghum has acted as our sustainability plan. All of the other crops we raise, we give to those that need, for those that are hungry. Not only our tribal communities, but the non-tribal community as well. However, as you know, it takes resources. It takes financial resources to reinvest in those efforts each year.
The syrup, the tribe, they sell that, but all the other produce that the tribe grows, they give that free to anybody. If you want some of it, you can come get it, and it's free to the public.
It has been an interesting journey, this sorghum project. It started out from a small conversation and the passion and the sparkle in the elders' eyes that we started with. But then it took us on a journey of the mysteriousness of the plant, how resistant it is to heat, how colorful the transition is to the chlorophyll-filled plants and to the beautiful golden brown syrup as the end product. We're going to sell it. We're going to sell it all, as in the past, all across the country. Hawaii, Washington State, Texas, we're shipping it to. And we're going to take those funds and we're going to turn it back into the gardens next year. And hopefully we can sustain it year after year after year, as long as it makes us healthy and happy.